So I have my objects here set up. I have a dirt mound and some vines climbing up. And what I might use this for is if I have a more abstract arrangement, maybe a pattern for a background specifically, where you may not be able to sell specific objects in it, it just might be a general pattern. For this I do have a kind of a vine appearance. In this case I have created a pattern I want to repeat, a bunch of trees. In Inkscape, patterns are fairly limited in that from what you can see they're black and white, and unless you create more of a mixed arrangement of objects, another box with maybe a colored layer below, it's not really your best option for patterns. Unless you are looking for that sort of effect, which sometimes you may, you could make your own background pattern by selecting Object, Pattern, Object to Pattern, and at this point if you wanted to manipulate this object once again, you would have to make it not a pattern by selecting Pattern, Pattern to Object, and it'll be split apart. For now I do want to keep it as a pattern. Select my object, and in here you will see an additional item pop up. Ideally, you will want this to be as small as possible so it repeats. In this case, I have a smaller rectangle, so it has repeated the portion here at the bottom, but has not included all the content. You can enlarge this. Your pattern will scale and remain sharp as it is a scalable vector graphic pattern. It is not a rasterized pattern. Ideally, you will want this to fill the size of your content. Now, it's already repeating across, and if I drag this out, you will see that what it has created a repetition of all my individual plants as well as what is being overlapped across the edge. It essentially repeats this pattern in a tile. This is one way I might use the spray tool as well as the tweak tool. You can also use these objects to create more complex arrangements by creating unions and divisions. When you have a pattern in your object, you can also select Pattern to Object, and at this point it'll create a duplicate copy since it had an instance of this held in the rectangle using this pattern previously. Now, that's just a handy way that if you were to delete the original pattern after you include it in your rectangle, you would still have that information available to you. You can also, say if you were making a treasure map from top down and you wanted to have certain parts represent icons in a random way, you could spray it with less of a frequency to generate a random position for the items. Sometimes when you have a lot of objects, if you have a lot of gradients and it's a little bit sluggish when you try to apply the rotate tweak effect to it, then you could also just, like I did earlier, where you would apply that directly to the spray tool. That pretty much covers what I wanted to show you on how to use the spray tool and the tweak tool. There are a few modes you can use here. You can play around with it, see the effects you get, maybe create a series of paths you want to follow along if you want to create trees or bushes. Maybe you just want to create a very random appearance, in which case you could just make a bunch of objects and then manipulate those that way. Doing random appearances, it's a lot more effective when you combine it with the align and distribute options, in that the fact that you can adjust how they will appear and say add some text.